going to ask the question. All right. So how did you come to know about the 1956, 1957 incident where these African men were murdered and tried for cannabis? Did you hear me? Did you hear my question?
Yes, I did. Interestingly, while I was driving with the other two ladies, we were three of us driving from Cape to Cairo. One of our brothers who was following me on the trip, dropped a note in my messenger. And it was a newspaper article written in isiZulu. And in all this time, I have no excuse as to why I cannot read isiZulu. But I am mindful of the environment and the way it was constructed, and my own dumbness or numbness that I couldn't see what was being shaped for me. And I had to respond and say, I cannot read. It will take me so long to read this. Could you give me the essence of the article? And he then mentions to me that this is about the battle, the Impi Yensangu, the Battle of Cannabis, which took place in Bergville.
Yes.
And I was so shocked because earlier on, we had gone and look for the place where the hanging had supposedly taken place. We got some information, Dr. Tandeka and we thought we'll go to the place. And I said, before cannabis moves on, let's go and honor those who were killed, those who were murdered.
So why were they murdered for cannabis? Why?
It's our responsibility.
What was the context?
Newspaper article, and I recognize.
I want to ask, what was the context of their murder?
So it was the army. So they were being tried for fighting back for their fields that were being set on fire.
Okay.
That was the context.
Okay.
In the hollows of this area in Bergville. And the army was arriving and they were fighting back, and the women and the men and protecting their fields. And they end up having their trial in Pietermaritzburg. And as the story has unfolded to me, I've sat with different elders along the way. And the latest version of telling me the story was just astounding, where they alerted me to the fact that on the 8th of August of 1956, the day before the march, the women were in meditation and praying for the sentencing that was going to happen on the 9th of March.
Go on, please. Tell us more. Barbara? Are you still there? Are you no longer there? That is strange. Everything, okay, she's coming back on. Yes, you are back. They go on again. Start again. Unmute. Or your audio is still connecting.
Yes, I'm connected now.
Start from the time when the women are meditating about it, praying for the sentences that's going to happen in the night.
Okay, so I've already sat in on listening to the story of the day of the hanging on the 21st of March, 1957. I've been invited at that point to join in on the visit to the gallows to hear the story of the gallows in Pretoria of the whole sentencing, and then to go to the cemetery and do the ceremonial stuff. However, at that time, because my husband had just passed, I felt I was it wasn't appropriate for me to join.
Too fragile and sensitive.
Too fragile and too sensitive. But I was mindful of how the information had found me. Following on from that, I sit with another elder who tells me that on the 8th of August, 1956, before the day of the march, the women were taking their passes, the scrapping of the passes to the union buildings. It's no coincidence that Strydom was the president at the time.
Interesting.
And I am sitting at Strydom listening to this
Yes,
story.
it's almost like quantum relation of some sort. Yeah.
And that night they were praying for the sentencing on the 8th of August. They were praying for the sentencing that was going to take place on the 9th of August, because the person who was going to do the judgment was known to be one of those terrible judges. So the women were aware of it. So they were praying for justice to prevail on the 9th of August, simultaneously as they're marching to the union the next day.
So when you say talk about 1956, you're talking about Charlotte Maxeke. You're talking about the marching of the women, the black sash and all that.
No, I'm talking about the four women the group of women that marched for the passes to the union buildings in Pretoria, the big march that celebrated on the 9th of August. The night of the 8th, they are praying because the sentencing was taking place on the 9th. Just look at the coincidences.
Oh, these things are happening on the same 9th of August. The sentencing of the men in KwaZulu for cannabis, yet the women are marching to the union building on the 9th also. It's a multi-dimensional kind of freedom fighting.
And on the 9th of August, they are sentenced to be hung on the 21st of March, 1957.
Wow, they had to choose the 21st of March. It seems to be a day of slaughtering. It seems to be a day of, yet at the same time, on a spiritual level, I mean, for the evil government, it's a day of slaughter, obviously, in all these different times, because it happened even in 1935, in Uitenhage, I think. There was a commemoration of the 1960s anti-pass law march. It was organized by Sobukwe. But then also 35 people in 1985, people got murdered for the very same thing. I think Ella Gwalanga also, in Cape Town. So it seems to be, at the same time, I think you raised in earlier that we are observing the autumn equinox, if I'm not mistaken. That autumn equinox, the day of renewal, the day of cleansing, the cosmically and divinely and astronomically, it's a day of cleansing. It's a day of the new moon. The sun is moving from the south, it's moving up to the north. Yet, for the terrestrial government, it's a day of slaughter. How serendipitous. But please tell us more. So what did you find in Berkeley?
So what I find very interesting for me is how everything ties. The 9th of August ties to the 21st of March, 1957. And then Sharpeville comes, 21st of March, 1960. And then I recall going to watch the life story of Bob Robert Sobukwe, the first viewing of his film, his life story. And when they do that filming, one of the messages that comes through is that history is told by those in power. So when we don't know the full history, we will only know the bits that they need to tell us. And I'm mindful that my journey is bringing to me information that I would have not ordinarily known. If I had been in corporate or other spaces, I would be so caught up with some of the things that are just surface related.
Just distracted.
I'm grateful to be in this space where it's linked to truth. It's linked to a deeper meaning. And I'm grateful that you could bring in this movement. When the sun goes to the north, why does its children need to see blood? Why do the North children need to see blood? What is it about their ancestry that needs to take blood back when the sun goes? back to them. And because we see it happening so often and in a timeline almost. So at this point in time, I know that there's an exhumation ceremony process that is currently underway to return the 23 back to the village, to acknowledge them, to honor the story, and possibly maybe then do the film. So it's changing. Simultaneously, cannabis is changing its story in South Africa. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, so we could honor that history. So that even if it's a two-liner in this book, people would stop and become curious. The purpose of the Power of Hemp is to create curiosity, for us to begin to ask different questions. To ask different questions. And if you noticed at the bottom of the book, it's got hashtag the Africa I see, because I've put Africa in its new direction, flowing with oil, with enough seed. I think that until we can say what it is we see, we are trapped in what other people want us to see. So may we explore the journey, each one of us with curiosity. May we check out of the narrative of fact checking according to who writes the fact, and may we become more reflective of our own personal journeys so that we can arrive where the elephants lead us. I'm here where the Ndlovus have led me.
I love that. I love that. So you said you have a sentence or two about the 23 in that book. Could you mind reading that area so that maybe we can get a context with regards to hemp today?
So I think for me, it was in the acknowledgements.
Oh, yes, that's very important.
The acknowledgements for me were different people that I needed to acknowledge. I started off with the Karen speaking community who were in refuge at that time, who were refugees in Perth at the time I arrived there in 2009, and I acknowledged the gift from that indigenous community. I then acknowledged Dr. Thandeka for her dedication and passion to a cannabis poverty eradicated Africa. I then acknowledge Ntutugo
Kuzwai.
Yabenguni
Kuzwai, yes.
For sharing the Impi Yensangu story of 21st of March 1957, when 23 people from Bergville were hanged. Our citizen scientists in rural communities, our indigenous knowledge holders, who in spite of and despite of all things have kept our cannabis story a wonder in the world. And then my passionate teacher, Wanda Bruce, who's taught me so much about holistic healing, about plants, about being a citizen scientist, and about teaching me.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And those acknowledgements are very important. Tutugo is like a walking library of African history, of heritage, of African heritage. We're going to have him here on this channel and on Green Ankh so that we can talk to him about the kind of knowledge he holds, because it's very vital for the keeping of memory and the justice to be done in our land. I wanted to quote you something, not a sentence, but just to show you. There's a book, before we had this conversation, I was reading online a book. I mean, I downloaded it, a PDF. It's by Chris S. Duval. I'm not sure if you know it. It's called The African Roots of Marijuana. And the interesting thing about it, it's the fact that it's published in 2019. And it talks about everything that people never speak about in terms of how cannabis in Africa took root in so many parts, from the Congo to various parts of Africa before the whole craze of smoking it. So he was talking about it as a ritual. He's talking about it being smoked in ritual and not and being used in medicinal settings, not just in recreational settings. So it's very much like your book in many ways, but we will talk about it maybe next time on part 2 of this conversation. Velo, say Sobon. Sobona Barbara. Yes. Yeah, okay. They come to fetch me because I've been away for a long time. So they've come to get me. Yes. Please say your final words.
So the book Trilogy was written on the premise of our pot that we cooked our food. And that the three legs of the pot would speak to the self-reliance of the African child. It would also speak to our magnificent abundance. When things stop multiplying, we must know that there's a problem. That's a red flag. And then it speaks to succession. What do we leave behind?
What do we leave behind?
For the next generation. So I'm activating seed banks for each family. Let us have our seed banks. Let us begin to have that language. There's a possibility a system could start making that illegal. So let's begin to open our eyes and start preparing. Let's know the source of our own food. And then we can top up with other food. Let's begin to share. Let's carry baskets of food to each other, like our grandmothers did. Let's activate our DNA to remember. And then, of course, the environment connects us to our ancestors, the land, keeping the land clean, and absolute belonging. So I give thanks.
Absolutely. I love that. And I also give thanks. Thank you so much for giving us your time, your whole afternoon. Even now, I'm going to explain myself to my children why I have been gone from 1, because I was doing an interview somewhere else from 1. So I've just been in and out, dipping in and out of them, and they are starting to demand my time. So it's very important. So we apologize to our children and we give thanks. We know that we are doing this for them, for their future, so that they can have a future that is really protected environmentally and otherwise, and economically, and an abundance. We are talking about abundance here, and we're talking about an end to lack. Yeah, and a consciousness about what we do with the soil and with ourselves, and with issues of justice and human rights, human being, beyond human rights, just human being. You know, it's very important. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much, my sister. We will meet again. We'll do a part 2 and a part 3.
Ngiyabonga.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Of course.